They laughed at me for being a single mum, but they didn't know my story. The room was filled with laughter and clinking glasses as everyone celebrated Claire and Jake's engagement. Emma walked in, holding her son Max's hand tightly, trying to stay calm. She wasn't sure why she even came. Family gatherings had never been easy, especially not with Claire. But Max deserved to see the family, and Emma wanted to believe this night could be different. The dinner was elegant, the kind of event where people dressed in their best clothes and pretended everything was perfect. But the moment Claire stood up to give her toast, the atmosphere shifted. Smiling sweetly at the crowd, she paused before turning her gaze toward Emma. "To my dear cousin Emma," Claire began, her voice dripping with false sweetness. Raising a child alone is a tough job, isn't it? But somehow, Emma manages it, doing it all without a husband to hold her hand. Quite the brave little single mom, don't you think? Her words cut through the room like a knife. A ripple of laughter followed. Emma's mother, Linda, and Uncle Mike exchanged glances and chuckled along, their eyes not meeting Emma's. The laughter grew louder, as if Emma's pain was their entertainment. Emma's cheeks burned with humiliation. She fought the urge to bolt from the room, but Max's small hand in hers reminded her why she stayed. Her throat tightened, but she swallowed the lump forming there. Tears pricked the corners of her eyes, but she blinked them away, unwilling to give them the satisfaction of seeing her break. Claire smirked, clearly enjoying the moment, basking in the approval of the family. But beneath the surface, Emma's heart was breaking. She had fought so hard to build a life for Max, working 2 jobs, sacrificing sleep and social life to give him a future. To be mocked in front of everyone she once called family felt like a betrayal. As the laughter died down and the toast ended, Emma forced a polite smile and turned back to her seat, her spirit bruised but not broken. She knew this wasn't the last time she'd face judgment, but tonight she promised herself she would stand tall for Max and for herself. Emma received the invitation despite a strained relationship with Claire. She stared at the elegant card in her hands, the gold-embossed letters spelling out the date of Claire's engagement dinner. The same Claire who hadn't spoken to her since Emma's breakup 2 years ago. The same Claire who had barely hidden her disapproval when Emma's son, Max, was born. Yet here was the invitation, delivered by their mother, Linda, with a gentle, almost pleading look. "Just keep the peace, Emma," Linda had said softly. "It's family, for Max's sake." Emma wanted to refuse. She wanted to protect herself from the inevitable humiliation she expected to face. But Max was 7 now, old enough to understand and feel left out. Emma thought about how lonely it had been raising Max alone. The sleepless nights, the endless work shifts, the financial stress that never seemed to ease. Claire's engagement felt like a reminder of everything Emma had lost: love, stability, and a sense of belonging in her own family. Claire and Emma had once been close, more like sisters than cousins. But everything changed after Emma's breakup with Max's father. The man had walked away when he found out about the pregnancy, leaving Emma to fend for herself. Claire's subtle, and sometimes not so subtle judgment started soon after. The whispered comments, the pointed glances during family gatherings, and now this engagement party invitation that felt more like a challenge than a celebration. The night of the engagement dinner, Emma dressed carefully in a modest but neat outfit. Max held her hand tightly as they walked into the elegant venue filled with glittering chandeliers and tables adorned with fine china. The air smelled of fresh flowers and expensive perfume, a stark contrast to the cramped apartment Emma called home. She tried to focus on Max's bright eyes, hoping to create a memory that wasn't filled with tension. The room buzzed with excitement as Claire and her fiancé, Jake, stood hand in hand, their smiles wide and practiced. Family members mingled, laughing and sharing stories. Emma felt the weight of stares, some curious, some dismissive. Her mother sat nearby, nodding at her every now and then, but saying nothing to ease the growing pit in Emma's stomach. Then came Claire's toast. Emma had hoped for something kind, a moment of reconciliation, or at least neutrality. Instead, Claire's words cut through the room like ice. "To my dear cousin Emma," Claire began, her voice sweet but laced with venom. "It's impressive how she's managed on her own, raising Max without a husband to lean on. A real single mum story, isn't it? Brave, but so different from what most of us expected." The laughter started small, but grew quickly, echoing around the room. Emma's mother and Uncle Mike were the loudest. Their smiles twisted in amusement. Emma's heart sank. The humiliation was unbearable, but she forced herself to sit still, to not cry in front of Max or the judging eyes. Max looked up at her, sensing the tension, but too young to fully understand. Emma's throat tightened, and she swallowed the tears threatening to spill. She wanted to tell Claire off, to expose the cruelty beneath the polite facade, but she stayed silent. She owed Max that much. Strength in the face of adversity. The rest of the evening was a blur. Emma smiled politely, answered polite questions, and endured whispered comments behind her back. She noticed Claire's triumphant smirk whenever their eyes met, but Emma refused to give her the satisfaction of seeing her break. When they finally left, Max held her hand tightly, his small fingers warm against her own. "Mom, why did they laugh at you?" he asked softly. Emma looked down, brushing a stray tear from her cheek. "Because sometimes people don't understand what it takes to be strong," she said. "But you know what? We're stronger than they think." Driving home, Emma felt a storm of emotions, hurt, anger, but also resolve. She had survived this night, and she would survive many more. For Max, she would build a life where he felt loved and proud, no matter what anyone else said. At home, Emma tucked Max into bed, kissing his forehead. "You're my world," she whispered, "and one day, they'll see how far we've come." She sat by the window, watching the city lights flicker. The future was uncertain, but Emma knew one thing for sure. No engagement dinner, no cruel words could define her worth. She was a mother, a fighter, and she would rise above the pain to give Max the life he deserved. Emma arrives with Max. The atmosphere is cold and distant. The moment she stepped into the grand hall, decorated with sparkling fairy lights and delicate floral arrangements, a heavy silence seemed to fall over the room. Families smiled and chatted, but the warmth felt reserved for everyone but her and Max. Claire, standing at the center near her fiancé Jake, didn't even glance in their direction. It was as if they were invisible. Max clutched her hand tightly, his small fingers trembling ever so slightly. Emma could feel the knot in her stomach tighten as she glanced toward the table where children were gathered, laughter and giggles drifting toward them. But Max was being quietly but firmly escorted away by a kindly woman to a kids' table in the far corner, far from where Emma was expected to sit. Emma's seat was nowhere near Claire or Jake, or even their close family friends. Instead, she found herself squeezed in between distant relatives who barely acknowledged her presence beyond polite nods. The conversation around her felt light but clipped, and every now and then she caught subtle glances that made it clear her presence was unwelcome. She swallowed the lump forming in her throat. Linda, her mother, sat just a couple of seats away. Emma hoped for some comfort, some sign of support. Instead, Linda gave her a tight, forced smile. "You look good," she said softly, but it felt hollow, more an obligation than a compliment. Emma's heart ached with the weight of that shallow kindness. She knew Linda was caught between wanting to keep the peace and wanting to side with Claire, who had always been the golden child in their family. Claire finally raised her glass for a toast. Emma's gaze involuntarily snapped to her. Claire's eyes never left Jake, never flickered toward Emma as she began to speak. "Tonight is about love, family, and new beginnings," Claire said, her voice bright and confident, but there was an edge to it, an unspoken message beneath the surface. "We are grateful for the people who support us on this journey." Emma forced herself to hold her head high, even as a cold chill ran down her spine. She tried to focus on Max, who sat with other kids, but the sting of exclusion was sharp. She glanced toward the kids' table and caught Max's eye. His smile was small but brave. He knew something wasn't right. As the dinner progressed, Claire's thinly veiled hostility grew clearer. When it was her turn to speak again, this time more casually, she said loud enough for the tables around her, "It's amazing how some people manage to get by on sheer grit, even when life throws them curveballs. Not everyone gets that chance or chooses to take it." The words hung in the air, and Emma's chest tightened. A few heads turned toward her. Linda shifted uncomfortably, but said nothing. Uncle Mike chuckled quietly, shaking his head as if Claire's jab was a clever joke. Emma clenched her fists under the table, resisting the urge to stand up and confront Claire. But she knew that wouldn't help Max or herself tonight. Instead, she focused on breathing steadily. reminding herself that she was here for Max. Between courses, Emma noticed whispered conversations behind her back, eyes darting her way, and stifled giggles. The family she once called hers had turned into strangers who judged her for circumstances she hadn't chosen. The loneliness in the crowded room was suffocating. After the main course, Claire stood up again and motioned for a round of applause for Jake's promotion at work, an achievement they had talked about for months. Applause echoed around the room, but Emma barely joined in, feeling the gulf that separated her from this moment of celebration. Max was brought back to her side during dessert. His face was flushed, a little tear still clinging to his cheek. "Mom, why won't they let me sit with you?" he whispered. Emma swallowed the lump in her throat. "Sometimes people don't understand," she said softly. "But you're the most important person to me, and nothing will ever change that." She wrapped her arms around him, feeling the warmth of his small body against her. In that moment, the coldness around her faded, replaced by the fierce determination to protect Max from the bitterness she felt. The final straw came when Claire raised her glass again for the last toast. "To new families, new futures, and knowing what we truly deserve," she said, her eyes flashing briefly in Emma's direction. Emma's heart broke, not for herself, but for Max, who had witnessed the night's cruelty. She knew the family wasn't the safe place it should have been for them, but she also knew she would build that safety for her son, no matter what. After the party, Emma gathered Max's coat and held his hand tightly as they stepped out into the cool night air. Max looked up at her with tired eyes, but managed a small smile. "Mom, will it always be like that?" Emma paused, searching for the right words. "No, Max. We're going to make our own family, one filled with love and respect, and we'll show them what family really means." As they walked away from the glittering hall and the distant echoes of laughter and whispered judgments, Emma felt a heavy weight lift off her shoulders. The night had been painful, but it had also clarified something vital. She was done being defined by others' opinions. She was a mother, a fighter, and for Max, she would rewrite their story with strength, love, and dignity. Claire's toast includes cruel jokes about single motherhood aimed at Emma. As the room quieted down and glasses were raised, Claire stepped forward with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Before we all enjoy this wonderful evening," she began, her voice dripping with false sweetness, "I want to take a moment to acknowledge the strong women in our lives." Her gaze swept the room and landed directly on Emma, especially those who bravely navigate life without, well, the usual support system. The room erupted in laughter, loud, sharp, and unforgiving. Claire's words were clear, and Emma knew exactly who she was targeting. The laughter felt like knives, cutting through her defenses. The warmth of the room vanished, replaced by a cold, uncomfortable tension. All eyes seemed to turn toward her, waiting for a reaction. Emma sat frozen, her hands clenched tightly in her lap. The sound of laughter was deafening, but inside she felt hollow and shrinking. Max, sitting beside her, looked up with wide, confused eyes. Emma gave him a small, reassuring smile, though her heart pounded fiercely. Aunt Karen, sitting nearby, leaned over to Linda with a dismissive chuckle. "Honestly, Emma's just too sensitive. It's all in good fun," she whispered, loudly enough for Emma to hear. "She needs to toughen up if she wants to keep up with us." Emma's stomach twisted painfully. She felt like she was standing alone in a spotlight, every flaw magnified for the entire family to see. The isolation was suffocating. Her attempts to smile and appear unaffected felt like a fragile mask barely holding together. Claire continued, oblivious to the damage her words were causing. "You know, being a single mom must be a full-time circus act, juggling work, kids, and somehow still making it look easy. I don't know how she does it, but hey, at least it makes for great stories at family dinners." She laughed again, prompting another round of chuckles from the crowd. Emma wanted to disappear. She imagined shrinking until she was invisible, or at least far away from the judgment and cruelty swirling in the room. But instead, she stayed rooted to her seat, her heart breaking quietly in front of everyone. Linda's eyes briefly met Emma's, but her expression was unreadable, part sympathy, part resignation. Emma remembered the many times her mother had urged her to just keep the peace, to not stir the pot, and to let things go. But tonight, those words felt like chains, binding her to humiliation. Max reached out and took Emma's hand. The innocent gesture was a lifeline, grounding her amidst the storm of ridicule. She squeezed his hand gently, drawing strength from his trust and love. No matter how much the family mocked her, Emma knew she had to stay strong, for Max and for herself. Aunt Karen wasn't done. She shook her head and muttered loud enough for Emma to hear. She's always making things about herself. If she didn't want the attention, she shouldn't have come. Emma's throat tightened. Her voice, when it finally emerged, was barely above a whisper. I came because it's family. Her words hung in the air, met with silence for a brief moment before the laughter resumed, now mixed with whispers and knowing glances. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. Emma's attempts to join conversations were met with cold shoulders or forced smiles. She felt as though she were an intruder in her own family, a painful reminder of something they preferred to ignore. Max sat close, his small face etched with worry. "Mum, why are they so mean?" he asked softly. Emma pulled him into a hug, fighting back tears. "Sometimes people say things when they don't understand, but you and I, we know the truth. We're strong, and we'll get through this." As the party wound down, Emma excused herself early, cradling Max close as they stepped outside into the crisp night air. The cool breeze brushed against her cheeks, mingling with the tears she'd held back all night. She took a deep breath, allowing herself a moment to feel the pain without shame. The family's ridicule had hurt deeply, but it hadn't broken her. Emma looked down at Max, his tired eyes searching hers for reassurance. "We'll build our own family, Max, one where love and respect come first, no matter what anyone else says." Max nodded slowly, resting his head against her shoulder. In that moment, despite the humiliation and loneliness, Emma found a flicker of hope. She knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. The judgment and rejection from those who were supposed to love her would leave scars. But Emma also knew she was stronger than their cruelty. For Max and for herself, she would rise above the ridicule, proving that family was more than blood. It was love, resilience, and unwavering support. That night, as they drove home in silence, Emma vowed to protect her son from the bitterness and judgment that had surrounded them. She would be the safe place Max could always return to, no matter how cold the world outside might become. Emma battles the urge to stand up or leave. The laughter still echoed in her ears, a harsh reminder of how deeply she was out of place in this room. Her heart pounded fiercely, and every instinct screamed at her to get up, to walk out the door, and never look back. But as she glanced down at Max, sitting quietly beside her with wide, innocent eyes, she knew she couldn't let him see her break. For his sake, she had to stay. Across the room, Jake shifted uncomfortably, his usual confident smile faltering as he caught the harshness of Claire's words landing on Emma. Emma noticed the flicker of sympathy in his eyes, the only sign that someone besides her son cared about the injustice unfolding. Despite his unease, Jake said nothing. Claire, seemingly unaware or unwilling to notice, continued to bask in the laughter she had provoked. Emma's mind was a whirlwind. She wanted to confront Claire, to demand why she chose to make her pain public, why the family seemed so willing to join in the humiliation. But she bit back the words, the fire in her throat too fierce to voice without breaking. Instead, she forced herself to breathe slowly, reminding herself that this was just one night, one event. It didn't define her or Max's life. The room felt suffocating, thick with judgment and whispers that Emma could almost hear swirling around her like cold winds. She caught the eyes of several relatives, some indifferent, some amused, others carefully avoiding her gaze. Even Linda, her mother, gave her a quick, forced smile that barely masked discomfort. Emma's chest tightened. She longed for a single ally in this sea of quiet cruelty. Max tugged gently on her sleeve, his small voice barely audible. "Mom, why are they laughing at you?" Emma's heart broke a little more, but she knelt down and looked him in the eyes. "Sometimes people don't understand things they've never had to live through, but you and I, we know who we are. We're strong, and their words can't change that." Max nodded slowly, but Emma could see the confusion lingering in his eyes. The innocence of childhood was fading too quickly under the weight of family tension, and it pained her deeply. She glanced back at Claire, who was now laughing with a group of cousins, seemingly oblivious to the damage she had caused. Emma's mind raced through memories of their shared past, the friendship that had frayed into resentment, the sharp words exchanged during years of unspoken hurts. She wondered what had fueled Claire's bitterness toward her. What made her so determined to make Emma the family scapegoat tonight? Jake approached Claire, his voice low, and Emma caught fragments of their conversation. His eyes darted briefly toward her again, regret and discomfort etched on his face. Emma wondered if Jake had ever seen this side of Claire before, the cruel edge she sharpened when the spotlight wasn't on her. The dinner dragged on, each minute heavier than the last. Emma tried to engage in small talk with a few relatives, but their polite smiles were thin and their eyes distant. The warmth of family connection she had hoped for was nowhere to be found. Her resolve hardened. Emma would not let this night define her or Max's place in the family. She reminded herself of the sacrifices she had made, working 2 jobs, enduring lonely nights, fighting to give Max a better future. She was proud of how far they'd come. When the toast ended, the atmosphere shifted but remained tense. Claire's victory smile was replaced by subtle glances that suggested the party was moving on, but Emma still felt trapped in a spotlight she never asked for. The biting comments and laughter had left invisible scars, but Emma refused to wear them openly. After the formal speeches, Linda approached Emma quietly, her voice soft but firm. "I'm sorry it was hard tonight. Just try to keep the peace, okay? Family isn't always perfect, but it's all we have." Emma nodded, though inside she felt a storm brewing. Keeping the peace meant swallowing pain and pretending to belong where she was unwelcome. Yet, for Max, she would endure it. Later, as guests mingled, Emma noticed Jake standing alone near the drinks table. He caught her eye and gave a tentative nod. It was a small gesture, but in the midst of alienation, it felt like a flicker of understanding. Emma realized then that even in a room full of judgment and cruelty, there could be pockets of kindness, quiet moments that offered hope. She tightened her grip on Max's hand and whispered, "We'll get through this. Together." The night would be remembered for its bitterness, but Emma was determined to write the next chapter differently. For Max's sake, for her own dignity, she would rise above the shame and build a future defined not by ridicule, but by resilience and love. As they prepared to leave, Emma took a deep breath and held her head high. The road ahead was uncertain, but her spirit was unbreakable. She would protect Max from the coldness of the world and show him what true strength looked like, not in spite of hardship, but because of it. The room was still ringing with laughter when Jake suddenly stood up, his face serious and voice steady. The merriment died down instantly as he cleared his throat and looked directly at Claire. "Enough," he said firmly, cutting through the noise like a sharp knife. Claire's smile faltered, surprise flickering across her face. The crowd, taken aback, quieted further, unsure of what was coming next. Jake didn't hesitate. "Claire, that was cruel. Making someone's personal struggles the punchline of your toast isn't just hurtful, it's unkind." All eyes shifted toward Emma, who sat frozen, her heart pounding with disbelief and hope all at once. Jake's gaze softened as he turned to her. "Emma, I want everyone here to know just how strong and dedicated you are. Raising Max alone, working so hard, and still showing up every day with love. That's real courage." Emma blinked back tears, overwhelmed by the unexpected support. The room felt charged, the tension thick but changing, as if Jake's words had shifted something fundamental. Jake continued, his voice steady but sincere. "Emma was there for me when I was at my lowest, when I was struggling, really struggling. She helped me without asking for anything in return. She didn't expect praise or thanks. She just helped because she's that kind of person." A hush fell over the crowd. No one spoke, stunned by the revelation. Family members exchanged glances, some guilty, some impressed, others unsure how to respond. The jovial atmosphere had been replaced by a sober, reflective silence. Claire's cheeks flushed with embarrassment and anger, but Jake held his ground. It's easy to judge someone from the outside, to make jokes when you don't see the whole story. But Emma's story, her strength, deserves respect, not ridicule. Emma looked around at her family, who moments before had mocked her so openly, now quietly absorbing Jake's words. Linda's expression softened, regret flickering in her eyes. Aunt Karen, who had dismissed Emma earlier, looked down, speechless. Max squeezed Emma's hand, sensing the change in the room. Emma smiled gently at a wave of relief washing over her. For the first time that evening, she felt truly seen, not as the target of jokes, but as the strong woman she was. Jake's defense didn't just protect Emma, it exposed the cruelty behind Claire's laughter and challenged the family's assumptions. It was a powerful reminder that everyone has battles unseen by others. Claire opened her mouth, but no words came out. The spotlight had shifted, and she found herself on the defensive. The laughter was gone, replaced by a heavy silence that seemed to say, "Think before you speak." Emma's heart swelled with gratitude. Jake's boldness had turned a humiliating night into a moment of dignity. She realized that standing tall wasn't just about enduring pain. It was about having allies brave enough to speak up. As Jake sat down, the room remained quiet, thoughtful. The family's dynamic had shifted, and though the night was far from perfect, a new respect had begun to take root. Emma looked at Jake, nodded silently, and whispered, "Thank you." He smiled back, a genuine warmth in his eyes. In that moment, Emma knew she wasn't alone, and that gave her strength to face whatever came next. Claire's face burned with fury, but no words came out. The room felt heavier as the laughter that once filled it evaporated into an awkward silence. She clenched her fists, jaw tight, glaring at Jake and then at Emma. The humiliation she had tried to heap on Emma had completely backfired. Linda, Emma's mother, sat nearby, her usual confident posture replaced by a rare look of shame. She avoided eye contact with Emma, perhaps regretting her earlier urging to keep the peace. Her lips pressed tightly together, and for once, she said nothing. Around the room, family members shifted in their seats, uncomfortable and unsure how to respond to Jake's bold defense. Aunt Karen, who had mocked Emma moments before, now looked down, fidgeting with her napkin. Uncle Mike cleared his throat, glanced at Claire, then quickly looked away. The old family hierarchy, the one where Claire had social power and Emma was the outsider, was suddenly disrupted. Emma sat straighter in her chair, feeling a strange mixture of relief and empowerment. For the first time that evening, she felt truly seen. Not as the single mom, Emma gathered Max's small hand firmly in hers, the weight of the evening still pressing on her chest, but a new sense of calm settling within. She rose from the table with quiet grace, her shoulders squared despite the lingering sting of the night's humiliation. Around her, conversations continued, but the air had shifted, less hostile, more uncertain. But Emma didn't look back. Her focus was forward, on the path she was choosing to take. Jake caught her eye as she passed and offered a small, respectful nod. No words, just a simple gesture of solidarity. It was the kind of support that spoke volumes, and Emma felt a flicker of warmth amidst the cold distance that had marked so much of the evening. She gave a brief, grateful smile and squeezed Max's hand gently. Outside, the night air was cool and refreshing. Emma took a deep breath, the crispness grounding her after hours of tension. Max looked up at her, his eyes wide but trusting. She felt a surge of protectiveness and pride. This wasn't just about enduring a difficult family gathering anymore. It was about reclaiming her story, on her terms. For too long, Emma had let others define her worth through whispered judgments and cruel jokes. Tonight had exposed the worst of that cruelty, but it had also unveiled something stronger, her own resilience. She realized shame didn't belong to her. It belonged to those who chose to wield it as a weapon. Emma was done carrying that burden. As they walked to the car, her mind replayed Jake's words, the unexpected defense that had shattered the evening's ugliness. It was proof that kindness and respect could break through even the thickest walls of family drama. Emma felt inspired, knowing she wasn't alone, even if that support came from unexpected places. Driving away from the house, Emma glanced at Max in the rearview mirror. He was quietly playing with a small toy, oblivious to the emotional storm they'd just weathered. That innocence reminded her why she had to keep moving forward, for him, for herself, for the future they would build together. Emma thought about what came next. The struggle wasn't over, but the shame that had once weighed her down was lifting. She was ready to embrace her self-worth fully, to reject the labels that had held her back. It was time to build a life defined not by others' opinions, but by her own courage and love. In the days that followed, Emma found herself stronger, more certain. She reconnected with friends who had stood by her quietly, rediscovered passions long buried beneath survival, and slowly rebuilt her confidence. Every small step was a victory, a quiet rebellion against the past. That night had been a turning point, a moment when humiliation threatened to break her, but instead became the catalyst for change. Emma was no longer just surviving, she was thriving. And as she looked ahead, she saw a horizon filled with possibility. Her future was no longer a shadow cast by family judgment, but a bright path she would walk with Max beside her. The silence after the storm was not emptiness, but the space where hope could grow. Emma held Max's hand a little tighter and smiled. This was her new beginning. Hey besties, thanks for watching all the way through. If you liked the story, please like, comment, and subscribe for more. See you next time.